Howdy folks, it is Scanner here. In this video we're going to go through more alternatives to Games Workshop games for people who are maybe looking for something a little different and to spread their wings in the hobby. The first video we did on this did extremely well, so thank you to everybody who watched it, and we also got some awesome recommendations in the comment section. The first video, one of the rules for inclusion was that I had to have played the game myself. And despite the incredulous responses from some people out there, no, I haven't managed to play every game that has ever existed in the history of tabletop gaming. Who knew? So you might have had a favourite game that I didn't have. Lots of people, on the other hand, were able to just politely and eloquently express their interest and desire in games that I hadn't mentioned, and they're the people that are fueling this second video thanks to their recommendations. So what I did was I took it upon myself to educate myself about these games, find out what I might be interested in, engage with other content creators out there and watch lots of things like battle reports and things like that. And for some of these games I even found my way into the Discords and we're speaking with the developers. So I've done a bit of research on each of the titles. The rules for inclusion on this list are that it's something that I have to want to buy. It's not something I've necessarily owned yet, it's not something I have played, but it's definitely on my radar as something that I want to buy. So let's dive straight into the list. The first game I want to talk about is Conquest by Parabellum. This is a high fantasy large-scale battler or a skirmish battler, depending on what you want to do. You can play Conquest, The Last Argument of Kings, or you can play Conquest First Blood. The miniatures remain the same across both games. You can use any miniature from one in the other. Your First Blood starter sets are like complete starter sets, including a leader and the entire rulebooks of First Blood for about $50. And all in all, it's just a really good fun time. This one really caught me upon recommendation, so I have actually already purchased the starter sets for every faction in the game, because that's just how I do apparently when I love sculpts. I have been in the Discord talking with people. The community around the game is really good, super positive, extremely welcoming, and all in all, it's just really hyper interesting stuff, and the future looks really bright for this game. There is a new edition of Last Argument of Kings on the way, so keep that in mind if you're thinking about jumping in. The Judge Dredd tabletop game by Warlord Games takes the classic and somewhat iconic comic book character, the world that they inhabit, and turns it into a tabletop skirmish game, which is extremely interesting. I've watched a lot of battle reports on this, and whilst like all games it largely depends on the people that you're watching play, it does seem to be extremely interesting and exciting and fun, because oftentimes it is really quite asymmetrical. You'll have a large group of a gang and a small number of judges going head to head, and it just looks like a huge amount of fun, and it's definitely something that I am interested in. It's also just the tip of a much bigger iceberg that we missed out on in the last video. The iceberg in question is called Warlord Games, who made the aforementioned Judge Dredd, and they also make all manner of other games that people wanted to talk about, like Bolt Action, Pike and Shot, SPQR, Beyond the Gates of Antares, just tons of stuff. Now, after going through all their offerings, what really kind of stands out to me, other than Judge Dredd, which I can really see myself buying into, is Beyond the Gates of Antares and Bolt Action. Now, I never really got to play historically based games. Most people that I knew back when I was a kid were all about the fantasy or the sci-fi, and the only person that I knew that I could really play historically based games with, it was impossible to enjoy playing with the guy. He was just that type of tabletop gamer. Nothing could be fun. So I just never really got into it. But Bolt Action, yeah, there's a big chance I'm going to be into that by the end of the year. So basically, it's impossible to go through everything that people recommended from Warlord Games. The three that really stand out to me for my own interest are definitely Judge Dredd, Bolt Action, and Beyond the Gates of Antares. So there you go. Up next, we have A Song of Ice and Fire by Warlord Games. Very interesting looking game. It's based on the Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire series by George R.R. Martin. Everybody's waiting for a satisfying ending from the books. Nobody got a satisfying ending from the TV show, but if the battle reports I've watched are anything to go by, a lot of these games have a satisfying ending. So it definitely looks super interesting. Pretty large scale. The double faction starter set is $150 from what I could see, and then this individual starting faction sets are $99. So price wise ain't so bad. You get fully functional armies in anything starter setty, and yeah, overall seems like a good game. Was very enjoyable to watch. Perhaps in lieu of everything else that I've got lined up that I want to jump into, overall a little bit time prohibitive, potentially. I'm not sure when I might jump into it, but the interest is definitively there. And certainly if I'm looking for something to fill in some previously filled GW time, it's something that might interest me from a fantasy point of view. Up next on the list, a lot of people recommended War Machine or Hordes. War Machine is a larger scale version of Hordes. Basically, they exist within the same universe. You can use the same miniatures. It's just that Hordes is skirmish and War Machine is more on the scale of a Warhammer 40k vibe, from what I could see. So this game was always very interesting because it's been around as long as me, pretty much. And when I was a boy, you were very aware that War Machine existed, and maybe you saw it in the hobby mags that you managed to get your hands on, but you had no way of getting the miniatures. Not then, not ever. It was just not going to happen. You went with Games Workshop all the time because there was a Games Workshop near you and a stockist and all the rest of it, whereas War Machines was just something that existed elsewhere in the world. Thankfully, in the age of the internet, this can all change. Even in sunny old Ireland where I live, I could now just order stuff in from Germany if I needed to. That would literally be the one that makes the most sense. There's very few War Machine stockists in Ireland. The UK is just, can't order from the UK anymore after Brexit. It's just not worth it financially to do so. And I could just go to Germany for my War Machine or Hordes needs. So I could actually get into this game finally if I wanted to, and it's interesting that people recommended it because when I was a kid it always had a strange allure. So there's a very big chance at some point over the next 8 months or so I'll be jumping into Hordes. It depends on the speed at which everything else happens. But yes, once again, like many of the games, or the games plural on this list, it's a dual system that you can jump into, either Hordes if for a small time commitment, I guess, or War Machine for a much bigger and scarier commitment. But it is a fantastic and fun looking game. Up next on the list, the 9th Age Fantasy Battles. Now this appears to be almost like a refuge for people who used to dig on Warhammer Fantasy Battles, but definitely did not dig on Age of Sigmar when it dropped up. It's a massive community project maintained and improved upon by that said community. If you check out their website, which will be linked below, there's all manner of information, rules. They've got it all broken out into teams of who does what, and you can apply to be on the teams if you think you've got the skills to help them out. This is a huge and impressive community project, I have to say. If you're sitting there in your house with a huge amount of old school Warhammer stuff and you're wondering what to do with it and how to make it relevant, this is how you make it relevant. This is what you do. This is the game that you would play. Just a staggering level of work done, considering everybody involved in this is basically there for the love. It's ridiculous. Definitely check out the webpage below. Up next on our list is Battletech, a game that was recommended to me by a lot of people on the previous video. In Battletech, you drive around and mass robots on a hex-based map and you smash each other up. Most people know the score with Battletech at this point, and there was a lot of surprise that it wasn't in the last video, that I had never played it. Here's the thing, I used to play it a lot when I was a kid over the course of about 3 to 5 years or so, I was quite active with Battletech in my gaming. It's just that when I was a kid was over 2 decades ago. I wasn't going to include a game that I hadn't played in 2 decades on the assumption that it was still good. Now, can you still get into Battletech? Yes, you can. Catalyst Games, the people who work on Battletech, they have new starter sets and new miniatures and things like that. They just appear to be impossible to get. If you want to get into Battletech right now, you're going to have to make friends with the idea of PDFs and proxies and things like this. Very much a DIY scene at the moment. Just based off what people were saying to me in the comments, there are websites, third-party websites, that you can get like miniatures from if you're in the mood, and I may or may not have purchased a considerable volume of metal miniatures. You'll never know, because I'll probably never get around to painting them, but that's beside the point. All in all, Battletech back when I was a kid was an amazing and fun game, and still certainly seems to be. And if you can get your hands, here's the thing, if you can get your hands on the new box sets and stuff, I would say go for it. If you can't and you're looking for an alternative to what you do now, I'd say there's easier games to put your time and effort into while Catalyst Labs sort out whatever is going on with their beginners and starter sets and things like that, because I've been like casually keeping an eye on them ever since they kind of kickstarted or brought it back, if you would, a number of years ago, and it's just, they've been impossible to get. I don't know why they don't want to sell things. I don't know why it's difficult to do so. These issues that they seem to have been having extend far beyond what lots of companies have run into with supply chain issues over the course of the pandemic. It seems to have been a problem since before that. I have spoken to people who have yet to receive their kickstarted sets, and that's nearly 3.5 years ago. So keep that in mind, I guess. Now, Marvel Crisis Protocol was also something that was recommended a lot from Atomic Mass Games. There's some advantages to this, and granted this is just the case in Ireland, but lots of these games are poorly supported and hard to get the follow-ups for, or even the starter sets for. You're always going abroad to get them. You're always incurring lots of shipping fees, basically. But Marvel Crisis Protocol is incredibly well supported here, and that tells me that it's very popular and that lots of people are into it. So finding clubs and finding games is probably going to be something that's very easy to do, effectively, no matter where you are, I would hazard. The starter set is really good value. Everything after that is a bit more picky your pocket kind of pricing as far as I'm concerned. Yes, it's a Marvel brand, and yes, the miniatures look lovely, but some of the prices are pretty insane. Like up to $60 for a singular character model, which is just kind of nutty and kind of unnecessary. That said, I don't really care, and I will more than likely be buying in quite hard to Marvel Crisis Protocol. Yes, these things exist because of people like me, and I'm sorry. Overall, the game looks super interesting. It looks to be really fun, quick flowing game, where they realized that with the Marvel license, they had the chance to pull in a lot of new players that would be drawn to tabletop strictly because of the Marvel license, the same way as GW copped back in the day that like the Lord of the Rings could bring in a whole bunch of new people. The rules seem really fun. Stuff like being able to hurl terrain at each other, and the flipping of the cards after your hero takes enough damage and they become the damaged version of themselves. I love it. It's all so comic booky and cartoony and superhero-y. It's all just fantastic. And of course, the miniatures are beautiful, and the potential paint schemes can be so vibrant and fun, whereas I normally paint a lot of drab stuff. I think I could have a huge amount of fun with these games overall. So yes, Marvel Crisis Protocol is more than likely something I will be jumping into extremely soon. Up next on the list is a game called Carnival, which is incredibly interesting. It's kind of set in Venice back in the day, and it features lots of interesting models and characters. Like you've got masked swordsmen going up against vampires, and weird priests with their demon monsters, and eldritch creatures from under the water, and all this kind of stuff. the miniature design is just absolutely beautiful for these things. There's so much character and there's such a high level of interest in what they have on display. They also have very solid value starter sets that make a huge amount of sense if you and a buddy are interested in jumping into the game. Now, me personally, I find this game fascinating. However, I also find it tickles me in such a way that it's something I don't want to get into until I would have more space. There will be some household renovations occurring next year, and when that does happen, I will have a lot more space for gaming and things like that, and I will wait till then until I get into Carnival. The reason why is because I would want to do a really nice board for the game. I think the terrain lends itself, or the terrain can lend itself to like a huge amount of input and effort, and that will really make the playing experience so much better. So I would really want to come up with some kind of modular board, especially for Carnival, where I might do an entire resin flat and then have the modular stuff that I can build in any way I want on top of it. But either way, that's a huge amount of work, effort and time for something that I wouldn't really have space for at the moment. But overall, yeah, Carnival looks dope as hell. Thank you to whoever it was that recommended that to me. Up next, we have a game called Relic Blade. This actually just showed up in the comments of the previous video, I think just yesterday or the day before, so it's never too late to recommend stuff to me. I will really pay attention to what you guys say. It's from Metal King Studio, which appears to be a one-person operation, which, if true, is lunacy. I do not know how the person involved is making all this stuff at this level of quality and interest happen, but there you go. It's a true skirmish game, small model count stuff. The battle reports I've watched have been absolutely wonderful. A lot of that, of course, is down to the fact that the battle reports I've been watching have been from Guerrilla Games, and they tend to do really nice battle reports, and they tend to give the smaller games an awful lot of attention and love. So shout out to them for making me fall in love with this game. I really have fallen in love with this game, and I do have a couple of questions about getting my hands on the models, and I really must reach out, I think, and ask those questions and see what the story is. But yes, this game I definitely want to jump into. I think the sculpts are just lovely. I think the rules are super interesting, and I just have loved the way it has played out on the battle reports that I have been watching. So yeah, to the person who recommended this to me, thank you so much. Core Space is a game that came highly recommended by quite a few people, and I can definitely see why. If you're on a budget, it's potentially one of the friendliest gaming systems of all time. You can do the starter set, you get a ton of cardboard terrain in it, like really nice looking stuff too. You get your factions, you can play it 1 to 6 players, you can play it competitively or cooperatively. Like, it's basically a one shot and done for all your gaming needs, and it's really well supported with an awful lot of follow-up and expansions and things like that for people who really want to go in on it. Will I be jumping into it? I'm not sure as to when, but yes, it definitely looks super interesting. I like the story. I like the idea of being like a roaming band of traders, always trying to stay one step ahead of either other traders or the weird robots that are following you and want to kill you, because that's what robots do. But yeah, no, overall it appeals to me on every level. So it's definitely something that I do want to jump into at some point in the future. And that's it for the recommendations in this video. Why? Because we're coming up on close to 20 minutes. If we make it much longer, nobody's going to watch it. There have been a ton of other recommendations, more than enough for a third video, which will be coming somewhere down the line, and potentially a fourth video. Just basically, let's keep it flowing. Watch the video, recommend your favorite games, your favorite alternatives to Games Workshop in the comments below. And let's just keep the train rolling for as long as we can. But that's it for this video, folks. Hopefully you found something in here that catches your eye. You can find links to every game mentioned in the description below, so just go off and have a look for yourself and maybe spend a bit of cash with these very talented game designers and sculptors and model makers and terrain makers and everybody else out there. Just throw a bit of cash at these folks so they can keep on doing what they do. So that's it from me. As always, thanks so much for watching and all the best.